Relax, man. Relax. Hey, get me an ambulance. Relax, man. Get me an ambulance here in the back. 613. Get me more units. It's okay. Therefore, in the rear.
Excuse me, sir. Can I please see this?
How many people you got shot?
I got one person shot.
Oh, can I please come see this, okay, please?
This shots fired by police. Shots fired by police. Secure the weapon.
Can I please see this, okay?
Hey, get back, get back. Where's it at?
Get me an ambulance in the back of the King.
What's the address?
Can I please see me, okay? Can I see you?
What's the address?
It's 6124, but can I see if it's okay?
Hey, get back in, get back in.
6124
Hey, don't move, brother.
King.
Okay, don't move.
6124 King. In the back.
Umbrella. She's up. Whole nother level of shit you can't even understand.
What is good, my people? We are live back again with another episode of The Forecast. So out in Houston, a 23-year-old brother by the name of Robbie Tolan was shot by police in his own driveway, getting out of his own car, walking into his own house. Now let's go back and see what this brother could have did that led to him getting shot by the police in his own driveway.
Anger is building up in a Dallas community this morning after a white police officer shot a black man in his own driveway. The victim is a former professional baseball player's son. His family claims it's a tragic case of racial profiling. Certainly from the outside, it would seem to be outrageous. CNN's Ed Lamandera is following the story live for us from Dallas. Ed, was this just a case of driving while black?
Well, that's clearly the question that a lot of people in this Houston suburb are asking this morning, and the allegations of racism and racial profiling are intensifying. The way Robbie Tolan's family describes it, he and his cousin were just walking up to their home after a late-night meal. So why is Tolan now hospitalized? A police officer's bullet lodged in his liver. It's a question sparking allegations of racism in this mostly white Houston suburb of Bellaire.
He was a victim of the worst case and the worst kind of racial profiling.
Tolan is the son of former Major League Baseball player Bobby Tolan. The 23-year-old spent a year playing with a Washington Nationals minor league team and recently played with the Bay Area Toros. Tolan's cousin says they had no idea the two men approaching them that night were cops.
We did not know it was a police officer. We just thought, who is this guy with this gun and this flashlight?
According to police, the officers thought the SUV the pair had just gotten out of was stolen. Relatives say Tolan's parents heard the commotion and came outside. Police acknowledge an altercation took place. Relatives say it involved his mother.
The cop, they said, pushed her against the wall, and her son was on his back at the time, and he raised up and asked, "What are you doing to my mom?" And the officer shot him while he was on the ground.
The car belongs to the Tolans. It wasn't stolen. Police say Robbie Tolan and his cousin were unarmed. As for the officer who shot him, he is white, a 10-year veteran with an excellent record. Police say they're looking into what happened, but deny any kind of racial profiling.
Anytime that someone is injured, we take it very seriously. And but as far as any allegations of racial profiling, I'd probably say that that's not really going to float.
Robbie Tolan sits in a Houston hospital bed, and this son of a once prominent Major League Baseball player finds his own aspiring baseball career in jeopardy.
I'm not concerned about his career right now as a baseball player. I'm concerned about my son's health.
John, the officer who fired the shot has been put on administrative leave. There's an investigation, an internal police investigation going on, so the police department is no longer commenting on the case, as well as the Harris County District Attorney's Office there in Houston. They're also investigating to determine whether or not charges will be filed against this officer. John?
So this was this young man's own car, this SUV. The police say they thought that he was driving a stolen vehicle. Have they illuminated in any degree why they thought that particular vehicle was stolen?
Well, that's the million-dollar question right now, and that's one of the reasons why this police investigation is going on, is to determine exactly why and how these officers came to determine why they believed this car was stolen and that these two men were car thief suspects at that point. That's the way officers were essentially viewing these two men at the time of the shooting.
We're just talking about making a snap judgment here. Do we know if they even ran the license plate to see if the car was stolen? Did they make a mistake?
Officers have been asked that question, and I think that's one of the things that they'll do in the investigation, go back and determine whether or not the officer in his patrol car had typed in the license plate number into the car, and to see what kind of calls or radio transmissions had been made to get that kind of information. The police department there in Bellaire just hasn't offered any information as to what's been determined so far as to what this officer did.
So it certainly sounds like they've got a lot of explaining to do, though.
So this brother Robbie Tolan and his cousin Anthony Cooper were pulling up into their driveway after coming back from getting something to eat, when out of nowhere the police pulls up on them because they say they thought they were armed and in a stolen vehicle. Nobody called the police or anything. They just saw them and thought they looked suspicious. So the police had Robbie and his cousin face down on the ground when his mom and dad, who happens to be a former professional baseball player, heard what was going on and came outside. And as his parents were trying to talk to the police, apparently Officer Jeffery Cotton got upset and ended up pushing his mother against the garage door. Now notice he pushed his mother and didn't push his father, but the police do admit that Officer Jeffery Cotton did push his mother into the garage door. Now, according to the police report, they say Robbie got up off of the ground, turned around, and Officer Jeffery Cotton had no other choice but to shoot him. But according to Robbie, according to witnesses, according to forensic evidence, he was on his hands and knees and turned around and said, "Don't push my mother." He wasn't even close to the officer. But this cop, Jeffery Cotton, still felt threatened and shot this brother in the chest.
There are now 3 separate investigations into a controversial police shooting outside Houston involving the son of a former Major League Baseball player. The 23-year-old, an aspiring ball player in his own right, remains hospitalized with a bullet lodged in his liver after an incident that's raised a lot of questions and outrage. NBC's Charles Hadlock reports.
Robbie Tolan had gone out for burgers with his cousin. After returning home, a Bellaire police officer approached them as they walked toward their house.
He didn't even put on his lights to say, "Hey, I'm a police officer." He came with us with a gun.
The officer accused them of driving a stolen SUV. The family's attorney says Tolan's mother tried to assure the officer that the vehicle was theirs. But the officer, he says, pushed her into the garage door. The family says Tolan, who was still on the ground, turned toward the officer.
He simply turned around and said, "Don't do that to my mother." He was probably 15 feet away from the officer at this point, who had just thrown his mother against the garage door. At that point, the officer drew his service revolver and shot him in the chest.
The vehicle, it turned out not to be stolen. Why they thought it was stolen, how they got a stolen report, I'm not clear yet.
Tolan is a minor league ball player, the son of Bobby Tolan, who played for the St. Louis Cardinals and the Cincinnati Reds, and made it to the World Series.
The Bellaire Police Department know what they did.
The Tolans say what happened in the front yard of their mostly white neighborhood is a clear case of racial profiling.
I think there is no question but that this has to do with racial profiling. There's simply no other explanation for it.
Over what is a great city in all respects.
The city council has offered its sympathies.
My thoughts and prayers have been with the Tolan family and Mr. Tolan every day and will continue to be.
The shooting is the first big case to cross the desk of Harris County's newly sworn-in district attorney.
I just want to make it clear that as an independent investigation, each side should be assured that it will be fair.
Bellaire police say that what happened in the Tolan's front yard is not a case of racial profiling, but they've declined to discuss the shooting, a shooting that has left a once promising athlete with an uncertain future.
Now, of course, Officer Jeffery Cotton feared for his life, and he had no other choice but to shoot this man. The police called it a tragedy and then gave him his paid vacation. But the whole time they adamantly rejected that this had anything to do with racial profiling. Of course, the cops in Houston don't see color and would never racially profile anybody. They would have thought anybody riding in a nice neighborhood with a nice car, pulling up to a nice house, was armed and in a stolen car. It just happened to be two brothers this time. But it could have happened to anybody. But eventually, Officer Jeffery Cotton was charged with aggravated assault. But a jury made up of 7 white women, 3 white men, and 2 black women reached a verdict of not guilty, not only on the assault charges, but not guilty on any charges. Not on deadly conduct, not reckless endangerment. That this cop didn't do anything wrong and everything he did was completely justified. And then outside of the courtroom, Jeffery Cotton said, "I'm glad all of this is over and I just want to get back to work," which he eventually did. And right after the criminal case, they threw out the federal civil lawsuit based on qualified immunity. They had to take their case all the way to the Supreme Court just to get their civil lawsuit reinstated.
Before Trayvon Martin, before Michael Brown, and before Sandra Bland, there was Robbie Tolan. He was gunned down in front of his own home after a confrontation with a Bellaire police officer back in 2008. The officer was cleared of all charges, but Tolan got some justice in a civil case that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. The High Court ruled in his favor. Now, almost 10 years later, Robbie is telling his story in his own words with a new book, and he's here to join us tonight. I want to welcome you to The Factor and talk about your new book, No Justice. What will we learn in this book that we didn't already know about your case, with you being right here in Houston?
I think, you know, people know the general story. They know the headlines, the bullet points, but, you know, they don't really know the underbelly about, you know, how we you know, went to get justice and went about getting justice. You know, they don't know, they may or may not know that my parents sold their home in Bellaire to pay for the appeal for the Supreme Court. They don't know that the lawyer, the appellate attorney, Martin Siegel, worked for over a year without getting a single dime because he believed in the case. Just some of the other, you know, we had a falling out with our old attorneys. You know, just little stuff like that. They don't really know. But now everything is concluded, and so we can finally put pen to paper and tell the whole story.
You had one of the few cases that actually made it to the U.S. Supreme Court, but your book is called No Justice. Why?
Well, I don't consider it, well, you know, the Supreme Court ruling was precedent setting, and that was, you know, obviously a win, but just, you know, because this type of thing is still happening, you know, from Michael Brown to Sandra Bland to you know, Tamir Rice, I mean, the list goes on and on. It's still happening. It doesn't seem like we're making strides towards stopping this epidemic. But so I think that was the driving force behind the title, No Justice.
When people read this book, what do you want them to walk away with? What kind of knowledge, what kind of information about you?
You know, that I think the resilience. You know, this book has a lot to do with my mom, man. She was a absolute terror in the courtroom, in the fight for justice. And so I want them to know about that, the resilience, that this could happen to anyone, because, you know, just like everyone else, you know, oh, that's not going to happen to me. I live in a nice neighborhood, and I thought the same thing. But, you know, if it could happen to you, it could happen to anyone. And I want this to be a call to action for people. I want people to say, okay, you know, enough is enough. You know, 9 times out of 10 when you hear stories of racial profiling, more specifically about police shootings, the victims are no longer with us. Their stories are told posthumously. And so, you know, here, the one of very few to live and tell his own story. And so I want this to be a call to action.
It took years of fighting and getting it all the way to the Supreme Court just to reach a financial settlement of $110,000 in a federal civil lawsuit. Not even for any kind of punishment for the cop, but just a lawsuit settlement against the city for being shot by a cop in your own driveway. Now, it didn't matter if he was an athlete. It didn't matter if his dad played in the World Series. It doesn't matter if you have money or not. If you're driving a nice car in a nice neighborhood, you're more likely to be racially profiled. I've seen it all the time. Cops either think you're a drug dealer or that you're in a stolen car or riding in the neighborhood looking to rob somebody. And the people who say, well, if you just work hard, you can overcome racism. If you just play by the rules of the system from within the system, then you'll be all right. That sounds good until you're riding past the police in a really expensive car and they pull you over because you look suspicious and you're probably armed, even if you're in a state where you're allowed to have guns. Or if you're standing in the front yard of your really expensive house and somebody calls the police on you because you look suspicious and they arrest you anyway, even though it's your own house. Or if one of your parents were a professional athlete and you live in a nice neighborhood driving a nice car, you can still be shot in your own driveway. As long as we're subject to their laws and their punishment, then nothing is going to change. They are in charge of our education, of what we learn. We don't even learn the right diet we're supposed to be eating, which foods work better for us and which don't. The schools our children go to is designed to be a pipeline right to the prison. Not only have our history, our language, our traditions have been taken from us, but a European mentality has been instilled into us. We can easily defend this system before we can come together to defend ourselves from this system. And we try to avoid the angry black man stereotype, but in actuality, we should be angry. After all of this time, after everything that's happened, we should be angry. And we should use that anger to change it, to do what we have to do, to come together, to put aside whatever differences that we have. I don't know how much evidence it takes for us to do what we have to do, but as long as we're subject to their laws and their system, and we don't create our own laws and enforce our own system, then the same thing will continue to happen over and over and over, and we'll still be having the same discussion 100 years from now.
Only on Fox tonight, he was gunned down by a Bellaire police officer, and his case made national headlines. And now it's in the national spotlight again.
And now Robbie Tolan is speaking on television locally for the first time about the case that changed his life forever. Isaiah Carey is here with the exclusive interview. Isaiah?
Well, guys, this is an interview we've all wanted to get for quite some time. Now, when you first meet Robbie Tolan, you expect him to be bitter about that episode in his life that left him hospitalized for more than a month. But you find a man who's found a mission to help others, and now he's doing that on a national TV show that will debut next week. It was a shooting that enraged a nation and left a rising minor league baseball player longing for justice.
It angered me, but it just kind of made me sad more than anything, you know, that this could happen and people will not be held accountable.
It was in 2008 when Robbie Tolan was shot in his parents' front yard by a Bellaire police officer. Tolan's attorneys say he was a victim of racial profiling.
You know, I lived in a very affluent neighborhood. I was from a certain background, and I said, oh, that, you know, it's unfortunate, it's tragic, but that probably won't ever happen to me. And it did, and so it was just kind of an eye-opener.
Very aggressive.
Didn't identify himself?
No, sir. Not at all. Not at all.
That's why Tolan is appearing in this episode of the national TV show, The Injustice Files on Investigation Discovery. The episode, Hood of Suspicion, takes a look at several cases, from Trayvon Martin to Robbie Tolan. Keith Beauchamp is a host and executive producer.
We chose 3 particular cases to focus on that would somewhat give you a little background about racial profiling, one, as well as stand your ground laws, and show how those stand your ground laws actually discriminates against African Americans.
Beauchamp says Tolan's case falls under the category of racial profiling, a white police officer who shoots a black man in a well-to-do community. The TV host says he wants to share the story that shocked a nation. Sgt Jeffery Cotton, the cop accused of shooting Tolan, was cleared and returned back to the beat in Bellaire without missing a beat.
The family hasn't really gotten closure. No one was held accountable for what happened to Robbie. you know, I felt the need of giving them a platform on my show.
Beauchamp says the episode, which airs February 13th, is designed to get people talking, enlighten some, and educate others that there's still a lot of work to do on race relations in this country.
I was angry for a while, and you know, it's easy to be angry. It's real easy to be angry and bitter about it, but you know, that's really no way to live.
In the meantime, Tolan, who's now 27, is in a different place. He sets his sights on a bigger picture, using his voice and his once victimization to help others who may not see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Thankfully, I'm still here to do God's work. So I think helping other people will receive justice will give me justice as well.
The U.S. Supreme Court reinstates a lawsuit filed by a Bellaire man shot by police on the porch of his family's home.
For 7 years, they have been in and out of court after Tolan was shot in his parents' front yard.
He sued the Bellaire Police Department and Sgt Jeffery Cotton, but a U.S. district judge ruled Tolan did not prove Sgt Cotton had violated his constitutional rights. The decision was upheld by the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, but today the U.S. Supreme Court reinstated Tolan's case.
The lawsuit claims Tolan's civil rights were violated and that he was racially profiled.
We need to continue to work to affect change. Until that happens, young black men unarmed are going to keep getting shot until we do something about it.
Well, joining us now is Marion via Bodycam. Marion, you took this battle to the Supreme Court, and who wrote the ultimate opinion?
Judge Scalia, who it was his only vote for a civil rights case in the United States Supreme Court.
You were disappointed with the settlement itself, but you do think the case has set a precedent for future families, so you think that's an important finding?
Absolutely. The way it's going to help families is that now the courts cannot use summary judgment and give police officers qualified immunity simply because they are police officers. That has been used to help all cases. It's Tolan versus Cotton is now case law. It's a law.
Well, and that's a very important finding.
I've received a letter addressed to my son, Jeffrey Berg, and to the lawyers in this case from the city of Bellaire through their lawyers. They have threatened us by telling us that we should not be talking publicly about this case. I cannot tell you how adamant the law firms and the Tolan family who are involved in this case are in speaking truth to power and telling the truth about what happened in Bellaire December 31st to Robbie Tolan. We won't be silenced. We will not allow a second attack by the city of Bellaire on the Tolan family by threatening us and telling us that we are acting in some way unethically by telling the truth about what happened. So I have a message to Mayor Siegel in Bellaire.
We went to the Supreme Court and we got the first unanimous decision in the Supreme Court in 13 years. That case is going to help others to file lawsuits against police brutality. We can't be afraid to fight. We can't be afraid to stand. We have to fight for our kids. I mean, think about it. I think about these little boys that just started school this year. They're in first grade, kindergarten. Do you know if we don't get this straight, they're going to still be dealing with this? The time is now.
Just speak the truth and speak our hearts regarding our precious president.
A year into his presidency, and these Dallas women are still thanking God for Donald Trump.
I know that God is the one who ordained him to be in this position.
Linda Churchwell and these other ladies all voted Trump. They like his conservative beliefs.
He has appointed a conservative SCOTUS. He has stood up for pro-life. He does stand up for the freedom of religion and the freedom of churches.
Does that wipe the slate clean then for you?
Whenever anyone accepts Christ into their heart and life and asks for forgiveness of their sins and makes him Lord, everybody's slate is wiped clean.
So it's no surprise this group couldn't care less about Trump's alleged affair with porn star Stormy Daniels back in 2006.
Do you care if your president had an affair before he was president?
No. Not if it's before. His base doesn't care about that. We care about jobs. We care about the economy, safety. That's what we care about. It's not relevant.
It doesn't matter because that's what Christianity is about. It's all about forgiveness. It's all about new beginnings. It's all about starting over. So it is irrelevant to me about what he did in 2006.
Do you all look to your faith?
Absolutely.
They agree with evangelical leader Tony Perkins that as long as Trump keeps pushing forward his conservative agenda, he deserves a pass, or a, quote, mulligan, as Perkins puts it.
The whole concept is mercy and grace. That's what Christianity is about. That's what those preachers and pastors represent, grace. They use the word mulligan, but it's about grace.
So a mulligan is grace.
They were using sports words.
I've never really heard that term before. Randy, we all have gotten a mulligan because of Christ Jesus. And so that's the bottom line.
And these women also agree with Reverend Franklin Graham, who says Donald Trump is a changed man.
This man, who is a successful businessman, did not have those people praying for him daily like he does now. He has transformed, even in the year that we have seen him, from a brash New York person to the president that we are proud of today.
I think we're all different people today than we were in 2006. He's a father, he's a grandfather. When you have children, the way you look at the world changes.
But when you look at evangelical Christianity, it's about family, it's about being faithful, and yet this doesn't seem to bother any of you.
Well, you know what bothers me are these stories that detract from all the good things he's doing for the American people. Instead of hearing that, we're hearing old news from someone that's not really that credible, from a stripper porn star.
He is doing the best job that we've ever seen.
So proud.
For a president. And I can
short time.
stand proud as an American again.
Among this group of Christian women, at least, Donald Trump can do no wrong.
All right, and we back on the forecast. So down in New Orleans, on the same night where Oscar Grant was shot and killed, a 22-year-old brother by the name of Adolph Grimes III was shot 14 times by New Orleans police, 12 times in the back. So let's go back and see what this brother Adolph Grimes did to get shot by the police 14 times, 12 times in the back, while he was sitting in his own car right outside of his grandmother's house.
As fireworks exploded near the French Quarter on New Year's Eve, 22-year-old Adolph Grimes, or Chris, as he's known to his family, just pulled up to his grandmother's New Orleans home after a 5-hour drive from Houston.
He made it for 12 o'clock, exactly, with seconds to spare.
A scant 3 hours later, he lay dying on the sidewalk, a half a block from his grandmother's front door. Fireworks giving way to the hue of flashing police lights. The Orleans Parish coroner says Grimes was shot 14 times, including 12 times in the back.
The violence has to stop. My child, will not be meaningless.
And Grimes didn't die at the hand of common street thugs. He was shot and killed by New Orleans police officers. The family wants to know why. Why cops descended on a young man with no police record who works for a phone company and teaches Bible study in Houston.
Have the police told you anything?
No. I know just as much as you know.
The police department won't release the names of the officers involved or the shooting report, saying the investigation is ongoing. But Police Superintendent Warren Riley says Grimes shot at police first when plainclothes officers surrounded Grimes' car. Riley says officers are trained to fire when fired upon and fire more than one shot. The FBI is now investigating following a request from the Grimes family.
We think that families should do everything they can to make sure that this investigation is as thorough and complete as possible so that they know the truth.
Grimes had a gun and a legal permit to carry the weapon. Authorities also say they found a shotgun in the car's trunk. The family says that's not true, and so far police have not produced the weapon. The 22-year-old, according to family members, had just walked out the front door and was in a car waiting for his cousin when the shooting started. Grimes' relatives don't believe for a minute that he opened fire first.
Collapse right here.
And the family attorney believes the investigation will show rogue cops and sloppy police work.
We know the FBI are going to do
full and complete investigation, and we're hoping that criminal charges be brought against all of these officers, the execution in this case.
It doesn't make sense, the family says over and over. A young man who has never been arrested or in trouble with the law. A loving father with a good job. A grieving mother and father say they won't be silenced and say they are not worried about a code of silence among officers, the so-called blue wall.
The wall is going to come down just like the walls of Jericho came down.
So this brother, Adolph Grimes, had just came from Houston to his grandmother's house in New Orleans so that he could celebrate New Year's with his family. So at about 3 o'clock in the morning, his family said that he had just walked out of the house and was waiting for his cousin so that they could leave. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, 9 plainclothes cops hop out of unmarked vehicles, run up on them and surround them, guns drawn. Now the police say they made it clear that they were cops. But I don't know how much time they took to identify themselves because he was shot 14 times within 3 minutes of them showing up. At least 2 witnesses say they didn't identify themselves. They didn't even turn on their police lights. They just hopped out on them and surrounded them and pulled their guns on them. Now, the police say this brother, who had never been in trouble before, never been arrested, who had a licensed gun with the permit to carry it, and even though it's 9 cops surrounding him, they claim that he shot first and forced them to shoot at him over 70 times. Now, this brother, Adolph Grimes, didn't have a record, didn't have a criminal past, but some of these officers have a history of excessive force. These cops have a worse record than he has, but these cops claim he was the one to open fire first. One of the cops, Greg LePen, a cop who shot at least 16 times, said that his motions were quick and sharp, consistent with someone who takes off running. The police also said they found another shotgun in his trunk, which his family denies and the police still haven't shown. Now, Sgt Daniel McMullan, who was supposed to be investigating the case, met with all 9 of the cops involved in the New Orleans Police Department parking lot all together so they could get their story straight before they gave an official statement, which is really collusion, but eventually Sgt. Daniel McMullan cleared all 9 officers of any wrongdoing in the shooting. And all 9 cops were right back on duty, right back on the street. And all his family can do is just keep filing lawsuits to try to get any kind of justice that they can get.
A year ago, a man was gunned down by New Orleans police on New Year's Day. Today, the case of Adolph Grimes III is back in the news once again. WDSU News Channel 6 anchor Latanya Norton is live in the newsroom now with more on this. Latanya, what's the latest in this case?
Well, Scott, the family of Adolph Grimes III is now suing the New Orleans Police Department for damages amounting to $1 million. The suit was filed yesterday, making it the 2nd civil case over his death. The family says it just wants justice to prevail and the officers involved in this case to be convicted.
Latanya, take us back to New Year's Day last year and kind of recap what happened here.
Well, it was New Year's Day 2009 on Governor's Nichols Street, and Grimes was shot by New Orleans police officers. He was shot 14 times in several different areas of his body. He was sitting inside a parked car. Police say that he shot at them first. Now, we should also add that an internal NOPD investigation has cleared all officers of any wrongdoing.
How is the family now remembering Grimes as we approach this anniversary of his death?
Well, a vigil is set for Sunday, January 9th. They say that the holidays are no longer merry for them. It's a holiday for most people, but for them, it's an awful reminder of what they've been through. A vigil set for January 9th on Governor Nichols Street at 11 o'clock in memory of Adolph Grimes III.
Now, we can't punish the police ourselves, and all the family can do is file lawsuits, which they also have no problem throwing out anyway. But we can't go after them in any criminal case. And they wouldn't go after themselves in a criminal case. The New Orleans Police Department actually has a record of messing up these kind of cases. Like in this case, these cops were compelled to cooperate and answer questions. But forcing cops or anybody to give statements without reading their Miranda rights makes whatever statement they give inadmissible as evidence. So if they're caught lying or they mess up the story or evidence comes out that completely goes against their story. Whatever statement they give cannot be used as evidence in court. The DOJ said compelling the officers to give statements without reading them their rights effectively immunize the statements that the cops give in any criminal case that may come up. They will take whatever step they need to take to protect themselves. The system is set up for them to work within the law to keep the system going. And if it isn't, they'll just completely change the law. We expect them to investigate themselves after they murder one of us, to be honest about it, and actually give us justice. But we try to fight from within that system and follow the rules of that system to try to change the rules of the system. But then we are surprised after we did everything exactly their way, and then at the last minute they moved the goalposts or completely changed the law, and we are surprised about it. Do you know why a black man who is armed is automatically a threat? Because if enough of us is armed and on the same page, it'll be hard for them to come into any of our neighborhoods and do anything to any of us. If we had a means to protect ourselves, then we just might start doing that. When we talk about supporting each other and building things for each other, then we're attacked and all of a sudden we're the racists. Because when we did control our kids' minds in our own education and our own system, we were very successful. We were forced to support each other, and in return, we became millionaires. We were able to hire each other. We were able to build our own schools and educate our own children. We would start teaching our children how to become doctors and lawyers. We will be able to control the food that comes into our neighborhoods or whatever else that comes into our neighborhoods. The one thing that we have not learned to do is to protect ourselves. And until we can learn to do that, whatever we build, whatever we do, will continue to be attacked. They already learned how to put their tribalisms to the side when it comes to us anyway. We have got to realize we are all we got. And we have no other choice but to put our tribalism aside, or else we'll continue to be in the same cycle for a very long time.
The former BART police officer who shot and killed unarmed BART passenger Oscar Grant took the stand today in his own defense. KRON 4's Justine Waltman was in the courtroom as the civil trial got underway. She's here now to tell us what happened. Justine.
Well, in court today, when he was asked for his reaction to the jury convicting him of involuntary manslaughter, he paused and said he disagreed with that verdict. And when the cell phone videos of the shooting were played for the jury, Messerly looked away from the monitors every single time. Former BART police officer Johannes Messerly, seen here in a previous video, testified on Wednesday, "I thought he could have been going for a gun." He's referring to Oscar Grant, the man he shot and killed on New Year's Day 2009 at the Fruitvale BART station. Cell phone videos show the men up against the platform wall and the shooting. In his criminal trial, the now 32-year-old testified he thought he reached for his taser, not his gun that night. Oscar Grant's father, who is serving time in prison, claims Messerly took away his son's civil rights and deprived him of a relationship with his son. To win this civil case, Grant's lawyer must prove Messerly wanted to harm Oscar Grant.
He mistakenly thought that Oscar Grant had a gun. You don't go and bring a taser out to try to defend yourself when you're presented with a gun. So that shows that he intended to kill him.
The other defendant in the lawsuit is Grant's best friend, John II Caldwell. He was on the platform that night. His mother's attorney argues he was threatened with a taser and pushed back onto the train after witnessing Oscar being shot and killed.
This case is not about money. It's not about getting an award. It's about showing that these gentlemen that were detained that night had rights, and they didn't deserve to be treated like this.
Caldwell was murdered in 2011. His mother is now taking her son's place on the plaintiff's table. She says it's difficult to relive the memories of that fatal night.
It was trauma. It was just terrorizing. I felt like they were in a war. They walked into a war that they were unaware of.
The lawsuit seeks an unspecified amount of money, and just for reference, Bart has already settled with Grant's mother and daughter for about $3 million. Bart is not named in this lawsuit, though. Meserly's attorney was not available for an interview, though. We wanted to talk to him after court, but we weren't able to.
So what was Meserly's demeanor like in court today?
Well, he was very calm, and he took some brief pauses before he answered questions. It looked like he was really thinking through what he wanted to say. This was a big contrast to the criminal trial. You may remember he was very tearful on the stand, especially when he was remembering what happened that night when he reached for his gun when he thought he had his taser in his hand. This time he was much more collected, and he will be back in court to start testimony up again on Friday.
This case still drums up a lot of emotions.
If we follow the rules and we tell the truth, we can work through almost anything. But
Renal Surpass has been on the job for just 4 months.
Congratulations.
In May, this 30-year career officer was sworn in as New Orleans' new police chief.
Do you feel the pressure?
I feel the pressure to ensure that we never make the same mistakes.
He spent 20 years on the force here, was the city's deputy chief before leaving for the Washington State Police in 2001, and later 6 years as the top cop in Nashville.
I believe in policing. I think it's the most noble profession on the planet.
The New Orleans Police Department is reeling from allegations of murder, conspiracy, and civil rights violations in the chaotic days following Hurricane Katrina. When the storm hit, dozens of police abandoned their posts. CBS News cameras caught others apparently looting stores. More than 500 officers were fired or disciplined for their actions.
My child is never coming back. Never, ever.
Sherelle Johnson's son, 17-year-old James Brissett, seen here in the only photo to survive the storm, was shot 6 times by police while crossing the Danziger Bridge 5 days after the storm. Police claimed self-defense. 5 officers have pleaded guilty to covering up the shooting. 4 others have been indicted and could receive the death penalty if convicted.
Everything that happened in Danziger that's admitted in the court is an insult to the community.
But efforts are being made to clean up the force. 18 current and former officers are under federal indictment. The Justice Department has launched at least 8 separate investigations and has stepped in to overhaul the entire police force. Something Surpass says the city needs.
I think there's no question that the New Orleans experience points that out. No question that New Orleans was a city that needed this desperately.
Even before Katrina, New Orleans was one of the most violent cities in America. Today, the city's murder rate is down from its post-Katrina record, but New Orleans still ranks as the nation's murder capital. Crimes like theft and burglary are down 10%, and police recruitment is up, bringing the force back to near pre-Katrina levels.
How realistic is it that you and your crew can turn this around?
Oh, I think it's absolutely a done deal.
Chief Surpass has an aggressive 65-point plan to improve the department, opening up meetings to the public, appointing a civilian to head the Public Integrity Unit for the first time, creating a community outreach program, and introducing a zero-tolerance code of conduct.
But if you lie, we're going to fire you. If you fail to report misconduct, we're going to fire you.
Surpass says there's still a long way to go, but he's not second-guessing his decision to come home.
I am convinced that going home was the right thing for me, my family, my children, and the families and children of the city of New Orleans.
The 3 policemen plus a former officer could face the death penalty if convicted on federal charges in the killing of James Brissett, shot 6 times on the Danziger Bridge. The 4th officer is also charged in the death of Ronald Madison, a mentally impaired man shot in the back.
Oh, Lord. It ripped my heart out. Even now. Excuse me.
Some of their colleagues celebrated when the officers twice beat state charges in connection with the shooting, which happened when they responded to reports of gunfire on the bridge in the chaotic days after Hurricane Katrina. They claimed they were shot at, though no gun was found on Brissett. Since February, federal prosecutors have charged 16 current or former NOPD officers for crimes committed following Katrina. 5 have already pled guilty for covering up the Brissett shooting.
We're going to try to build the best police department in the country. We have a very long way to go.
The mayor has asked the federal Justice Department for help cleaning up the New Orleans police, long plagued by what many see as a culture of corruption, including allegations of unconstitutional searches, racial profiling, and a failure to protect certain neighborhoods. There are now 8 federal probes underway in New Orleans, where the mother of James Brissett wants justice.
You killed my child, you deserve to die too.
And where an alarming number of those trusted to enforce the law stand accused of breaking it.
I just feel like that's long overdue. And I feel like the situation could have been handled way better.
A high school student reacts to the news that the cop who attacked and arrested him and then lied about the incident has been fired. It is the latest black eye for the New Orleans Police Department. WDSU reporter Simney Chewin is on your side live with tonight's big local story. Simney?
Norman, David Ducros was found guilty in juvenile court a few months ago of resisting arrest and assault on an officer. He says the officer's termination proves his innocence.
I feel safer knowing that officers like that won't be a part of our community or on the force anymore.
David Ducros says he feels relieved hearing that Officer Chadwick Taylor, the undercover cop who attacked him last September, has been fired for lying about the beating.
Whatever you do in the dark will come to the light. And I don't hold grudges against anybody. I forgave him a long, long time ago.
A pool of blood was left at the scene near Warren Eastern High School after Taylor witnessed what was believed to be a drug deal between then 16-year-old Ducros and his friend. Police said Ducros resisted arrest, but witnesses told investigators with NOPD's Public Integrity Bureau that Taylor kicked Ducros in the head long after the fight was over, which Taylor denied, and drugs were never found on the scene. Ducros says he's been waiting to hear something, anything from police for a year, especially since at the time, PIB promised action.
We swiftly investigate.
Superintendent Ronald Surpass says the year-long PIB investigation is another example of how serious the department is about having zero tolerance for untruthful behavior. NOPD also found that Taylor used unauthorized force.
Our investigators take their time. There were a lot of witnesses to interview. There was a lot of information to get accurate and correct.
The 17-year-old senior, who is on the honor roll and a student athlete, says the incident has taught him a lesson about life's hard knocks.
It made me realize one thing. You don't have to go looking for trouble. It finds you. So, I mean, now, I try and be more cautious and listen to my grandma and don't go here, don't go there.
While police say they hope this is another step in restoring the public's trust, Ducros says it's not going to be that easy.
I think it's going to be a long, long, long time before we could trust the NOPD. I just feel like that's long overdue. And I feel like the situation could have been handled way better.
Ducros' grandmother, Sheila Lewis, says she is also relieved but also frustrated because she says she hasn't been able to get any answers from police regarding the investigation. In fact, Lewis learned of the officer's dismissal when we notified her this afternoon. Surpass says PIB has a practice of notifying complainants of the outcome, but I spoke to the family moments ago and they still hadn't heard from NOPD. Norman?
Meantime, Simney, Sergeant Richard Welch was also disciplined in connection with this investigation. Police say Welch was suspended for 2 days without pay for not properly supervising.
I believe so. Take that road back from County Royal Bar. I don't know if there's another.
Let me see your hands now. Put them up. Put them up. Put your hands up or you're going to get dog bit. Put them up. No, you're not talking. Put your hands up. Roll over on your stomach. Don't put your hands down, man. Put the gun down. Drop whatever you got. Drop it. Drop it. Don't play around, man. Look at me. What's your name? Hold on. What is it? Sean? Because Sean, look at me. All right, listen. Here. Dan, don't say a word. Listen to me. Sean, look at me. No, I'm not coming over there. Listen to me. Sean. Listen to me. Shh, don't talk. Sean, look at me. My name's Jeremy. Okay? You listening to me? Sean, this is what I'm going to tell you. All right? I don't want you to... No, we're not... Sean, look at me. Sean, look at me. Just look at me, okay? Pay attention to me. Don't pay attention to anybody else. Pay attention to me. Here's what I want to tell you. Nobody's coming, dude. Look at me. It's just me and him. Sean, look at me. Listen to me. Don't talk and listen. Sean, listen. I'm trying to help you, okay? Sean, please don't do this. Get up, man, please. Listen, it's over with. Okay? So here's the deal. It's not a big deal. Everybody makes mistakes. I've made mistakes. He's made mistakes. We've all made them. But listen, here's what makes the difference between a man that made a mistake and a man that's making a wrong choice. Look at me. Sean, look at me. People that make mistakes, just hold up right there. Sean, look at me. Pay attention to me. Sean, look at me. Sean, pay attention to me. All right, listen. I know that you don't have a gun. Okay? I know you don't. But what I'm trying to get you to understand is I know you don't have a gun, but I'm not trying to come in there and beat you up. I'm not trying to come in there and hurt you. I'm not. Listen, if I wanted to hurt you, I would have let that dog go. Okay? Because I don't want to hurt you. I know you don't have a gun. I know you're upset. I know you're mad about what's going on. I know you're upset. Okay? I'm not worried about that knife. I just want you to know. That's not why I'm standing over here. I'm trying to give you the chance to make this right. I know you're scared, dude. Listen, look, for me, I just stood in a pile of hornets and just got stung like 20 times. My dog just got stung 20 times. But that's okay, man. It's just jail. And then you're over with. No, I do understand. Listen to me. No, listen, don't act like that because I'm not coming over there and you're not going to do anything, and you and I both know that. That's all you got to do. Stand up, walk over here to me. If you don't want to go to them, you don't trust them, fine. Stand up, come right here like a man. Put down your knife, walk over here, and I'll put you in handcuffs, and I promise you, we will walk out here together. I will still treat you with respect as we leave. Just walk out here. Keep your hands up high. Did you leave the knife over there? Okay, keep walking. Keep walking. You can light that up. Loose. Plots. I'm just going to lay the dog down. Keep walking this way. Plots. That's fine. Keep walking this way. Stop right there. Turn around. Keep your hands up, 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 up. Just like that. I gave you my word, right? All right. Put your hands behind your back. Live. He won't bite you. Live. Good job, buddy. Good boy. Leave it. He's just smelling you. All right. Can we get out of these freaking... Hey, don't walk over there, dummy. You're going to get... Let me get your phone. John, hold on. Oh, gosh. Put that in my pocket. Hey, look at me. You're going to be okay. Look at me. Yeah, you are. I promise you. Let me pat you down real quick.
I have nothing.
Okay. Yeah. Did you leave the knife over there?
That's my work knife.
Yeah, it's like a box cutter.
Yeah.
All right.
I have nothing.
All right, cool. Let's go back to the car. Look, so far, lying to you? I ain't gonna lie to you, bud. I've got no reason. I don't know about you, but I got my ass eat up by these.
I do too.
All right, and we back on the forecast, and I want to say RIP to the brother Adolph Grimes III, and luckily the brother Robbie Tolan is still alive and well and able to tell his story himself. Now, these two brothers were just sitting in their own cars in front of their family's house, and the police ran up on both of them because they quote-unquote looked suspicious. Neither had a criminal record. One was in a nice neighborhood with a nice car, completely unarmed with no weapons. One was in a more poverty-filled neighborhood with a licensed firearm that he was legally able to carry, but they both had the same results. None of these cops got any criminal charges against them. None of these cops had to face any punishment. They even fought these families' civil lawsuits. But as long as we're subject to their laws, subject to their punishment, they respond with more urgency when someone doesn't willingly fall in line under them. But we have to respond with more urgency than they have when they are shooting down our children, when they are shooting down our elders, shooting down our brothers and sisters, no matter what age they are. We can't let them respond with more urgency than we have. And until we can do that and put aside our tribal differences, then they will continue to have the upper hand. We will continue to be subject to their laws and their punishment. And we'll continue to beg and cry and plead for justice. So as always, man, we have got to start standing for something, or we're going to keep falling for anything.